I was going to talk about Marvel What If Season 2 first because, it's the older thing, but then I thought, what the heck? Let me jump on this while it's actually still pretty fresh. Echo! Latest series in the MCU. Latest Disney Plus Marvel series. Yes, I am still going to do Marvel What If Season 2. It'll just come a little bit later. I'm already late to that one. What's a few more days or a week or whatever. So, this is a spinoff and a continuation for the character of Echo, aka Maya, who was introduced in Hawkeye, played by Alaqua Cox. And this is very much her story. This follows her. Actually, we get a little bit sort of before and even in parallel to the events that we saw in Hawkeye, but then it mostly picks up about 5 months after that. I am going to talk about this pretty freely. There are going to be spoilers as I start getting into it. I will say broad scope, broad spectrum overall. This was pretty solid. I'd actually say this is probably in the top three in terms of Marvel series on Disney Plus. The other two in the top three being Loki and Hawkeye, fittingly enough, which this spun off from. I mean, my main concern was it just falling apart as it went. A lot of the Marvel stuff has just had a consistency problem, either where it fell apart towards the end or maybe even a big lull in the middle. Like, I'm not going to go blow for blow on every single one of the Marvel Netflix shows, but just like as an example or two, or three, or however many I do, WandaVision started out very interesting, very intriguing, and then once Agatha showed up, the show forgot what it was and just did something completely different and lost the thread. And then there was something like Ms. Marvel, which has a phenomenal cast, but there's a whole section in the middle that feels like it's a second season story wedged into the middle of a first season story. And the whole thing is very disjointed as a result. And since it is injecting a story that really kind of needs more focus into the middle of the main story that it's doing, it kind of removes the weight behind either one. They both feel a little bit shortchanged. Moon Knight was pretty great up until the last episode, where, like WandaVision before it, it forgot what it was doing. And then Secret Invasion was just a mess from start to finish. But this does maintain a consistency of quality that is just relieving. Honestly, I was going to say refreshing, but really it's relieving, because this feels like it was put together with a fair bit more care than a lot of the Marvel shows, which honestly, careless feels like a good term for a chunk of them. The cast is great. Alaqua Cox is really good as Maya. It's it's a difficult thing to play a very stoic character without having it come across as just flat and unemotive. And while Maya, I won't say as a character, has the widest range emotionally in the world, I don't think that's down to the actor. I think that is the character. The character's pretty emotionally stunted. And I think that is reflective and it makes sense. But there is still depth. There's still an inner life to the character that she brings across very well. They also brought back the actor who played young Maya, who also showed up in Hawkeye, and she's great too. I think so far, Hawkeye and this are the only things she's acted in. I hope she gets more work. She's really good. And then I'll get into some of the supporting cast a little bit later, because it's hard to know what to classify as spoilers in this. I guess it kind of depends on whether or not you've seen the marketing and the trailers. Regardless, talking about a very heavily indigenous cast, which is also really nice to see, including like just performers I like seeing show up, like Graham Greene or Tantu Cardinal. Actually, it's funny. I've met her. Um, Way back when I was still a teenager, I worked as a production assistant on a local independent film, and Tantu Cardinal was in it. She's lovely, by the way. She's just a delightful person. She gets a really good highlight here too. She really gets to show what she can do. But so does most of the supporting cast, and it's a nice mix and range of personalities and characters. Even if you feel that any one individual one is like, oh, that one's a little bit, not the deepest character, and that's an Indigenous character. It doesn't matter because there's a bunch of them. Even if you feel some of them are shallow, like there isn't one single template, they are all fitting. This is kind of what I talked about over on the main channel. I talked about the best way to get more queer representation is to just have more of it. So even if one isn't the best, there's others for you to go, oh, well, we've still got this. Kind of the same principle here. That's not me saying that any of them are shallow. I don't think any of them are, but I'm saying there's a nice breadth and range. They're not flattened into like some kind of archetypical indigenous template. And that's just nice to see. And overall, I think it's solid. I think the action scenes, well, the action scene in the first episode especially, which there's a single cut action scene that is phenomenal. The show never really hits that high again with the action scenes, though the action scenes remain pretty solid throughout. So, and there's still some good stuff later on, but that is by far the best action scene in it. And it's always best when it's grounded and visceral, and like there's a thing on a train which is it's very CGI. It still works, but it's not quite as tangible as the better action scenes in this are. I am going to have to start talking about the plot in some more specifics, so you can consider this your spoiler warning. Overall, I do recommend it, especially if this character left a positive impression on you from Hawkeye. And yes, when I get more into spoilers, I will talk about some of the ways in which some of the more supernatural feels like an odd word. Some of the less realistic, I guess, or less grounded. That's a better term. Less grounded aspects of the show and how they integrate. And I've got a kind of two minds on that, but stick a pin in that. I'll get back to it. So there's your spoiler warning. We're going to talk overall, just going through it. So Vincent D'Onofrio back as the Kingpin. He survived getting shot right in the face. What are the odds of that? Not great, but who cares? He's really good in this part, and he remains really good in this part. His version of Kingpin is really layered, and I enjoy that. I don't want every version of the Kingpin to be this. I actually also really like some of the just more flat out, almost borderline cartoonish iterations. Michael Clark Duncan was a great Kingpin. But I really enjoy the depth that he brings to this character, and that level of complexity makes him work, because there are times otherwise where his behavior, it's like, are you actually running a successful crime organization with the way you are? But it manages to convey just enough of his volatility that you buy the decisions that he makes, even as maybe that wasn't the best decision from a cold, calculated perspective. But he's not purely cold and calculated. He runs hot and cold. He can get very emotional. And that's really well captured by D'Onofrio. He just rules in this role. It was interesting how they kind of got him cleared out of this story without having him get killed again. Which I suppose brings me to the issue of the less grounded aspects. Now, I've seen, I haven't looked into other people's full reviews, but I've gotten a little bit of a feel that there seems to be some criticism or concern, or feel that it doesn't fully gel the aspects that, again, are less grounded. So the ancestral stuff, the stuff that ultimately kind of manifests in a certain amount of superpowers for Maya and some members of her family. And I'm really of two minds about this. I will say it was very jarring when the very first thing we see is this creation myth. And I'm watching this like, this looks like something out of freaking Guardians of the Galaxy. What is this? Because I came in here for a family and crime drama, and that is here, but it is sharing space with some, more heightened aspects. The thing is, them tying it to some particular indigenous traditions. And it's made very clear that the Choctaw Nation was pretty directly involved and consulted on a fair amount of stuff. That said, I can't vouch for the accuracy. From what I could tell from a little bit of research, it does seem to at least be not making stuff up whole cloth in terms of stuff like the creation myth and certain traditions and whatnot. as I said before, there's a pretty decent number of Indigenous actors, and they also got various Indigenous writers and I think directors as well. But like, they're not all necessarily from that tribe. I'm actually not sure if any of them are. But there do appear to have been consultations, which is good because this is a real tribe that they are evoking and they are representing within this. So it's important to get stuff right. So I'm inclined, with everything that I've been able to find, I'm inclined to give the benefit of the doubt that this is a accurate representation of the traditions, beliefs, and culture of the Choctaw people. But there does still leave an odd feeling to it. And as I kind of alluded to, I'm a little bit torn on this. On the one hand, it feels very strange for an existing society, an existing tribe's culture, beliefs, religion, if that's what they're comfortable calling it, whatever they may feel best describes it. It feels odd to have that literalized in a world where, like, right next door, there's the literalization of stuff like ancient alien theory and like the Eternals. So it just feels weird, in a way that, like, I know, like, the MCU already kind of did this with Thor, because that also has its roots in, traditional beliefs and a certain kind of religion. But it still feels odd in a way. Like, in a way that I think it would feel odd if aspects of Christianity were literalized within the MCU. It would feel strange. But at the same time, I'm not sure there was an easy way out of this, because the alternative is because I don't think the traditionalist aspects, especially like the idea of the span across ancestors. I actually really like that the title of each episode, is a ancestor of Maya's, leading up to the final episode just being her name. I actually quite like that touch. I don't think the story overall would have benefited from stripping these aspects out completely. And one could make the argument that if they're not going to be literalized in any way, then for them to exist in a world where so much supernatural and like historical, this was religion or superstition, but it turns out it's real, exists in the MCU overall, one could actually make an argument that if they just didn't have any of it literalized here, that it actually is kind of delegitimizing it in compared to, again, stuff like ancient aliens, because it's like, oh, no, in this universe, that's real. These beliefs of this tribe, like, that's not real, though. And which is the better option? I don't know. I think it was potentially a little fraught either way. I suppose one could argue that if they didn't have the literalization of these traditions sort of manifesting by the very end a little bit as powers, that people wouldn't necessarily have thought about it at all. Just don't bring it up. You've got this branded as Marvel Spotlight. Maybe we can just treat it a little bit differently, in terms of just keeping it completely grounded. They did what they did, and it's certainly not my place to say that it was poorly handled or offensive, because I have no grounds on which to say any of that. I'm only speaking as a viewer, sort of saying that it feels a little weird, but then I think about the alternative, and I'm not sure that's better. I don't know. I will say that my weirdness is just because it exists in the MCU, not because of the story in and of itself. I actually think the general and gradual buildup of the sort of ancestors guiding and even to a certain degree empowering, I do think it works. And I do think it fits the overall themes, especially about family coming together and deciding and embracing who your family actually is. And it's actually kind of interesting that in this case, it's not chosen family, it is blood family. While I am very much somebody who advocates for the general idea of you do not owe people anything just because you're related to them, and I tend to lean in the favor of found family over blood relations, if you're going to make me choose just one. That having been said, like, there's a validity to stories where the found family you were moving towards wasn't good for you, and maybe you do need to go back home. And I think this is a really good encapsulation of telling that kind of story well. So again, overall, I think this is pretty strong pretty positive. It does seem to fully canonize the Netflix Daredevil show, because we have Devil appearing in the very first episode in the same suit that he appeared in that show. Fisk seems to be consistent with that. I think they've confirmed that his wife Vanessa is going to show up in the Daredevil show that's coming eventually. I hope so. While he's good in this, he's missing Vanessa, like, as a character. He is great on his own, but like his dynamic with her especially was really good, and I am missing that a little bit. I'm not sure it would have fully benefited this story, but especially during some of the flashbacks, I don't know. I would have liked to have seen her. That's all. It's no point in getting overly hung up about that. And I don't think it's a plot hole. Last we saw her, she was, I believe, being arrested. So I don't think it's something they need to necessarily cover for. I don't know. I miss her. That's all. And yeah, this is pretty solid. I'll be curious if they make future use of Maya, because it seems like there's a good place to just leave her. I mean, there are probably ways to bring her back in, but overall, I'd say, no. I feel like this is a good, solid, standalone story for her, and maybe you can just stop there. I mean, Marvel as a whole will obviously keep going. And I'm not saying, like, Alakwa Cox should not get more work. I absolutely hope she does. And, ideally also outside of the MCU. But I found this pretty satisfying. It's not, like, phenomenal. It's not, like, I say top 3, like, that's collectively. Loki's still the best show that Disney, Marvel has done on Disney Plus by a bit. But this is pretty close to Hawkeye. I actually am kind of going back and forth on which one I think is better. They're tonally quite different. Hawkeye is a lot lighter, and it's a lot more fun, fluffy entertainment than this is. So might kind of depend on my mood for which one I would place over the other. But I was really pleasantly surprised by this. Yeah, I feel comfortable saying this is very close to, if does not exceed, the quality of Hawkeye. And Hawkeye was already one of the better MCU offerings on Disney Plus. So I'd say this is worth your time, especially if you liked Maya as a character in Hawkeye. Yeah, that's Echo. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Patreon pays the bills, enables me to do this as my living. Even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. They all help me out. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so you can come on back next time you need a break. Drum roll for my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Zubin Lafula, Goddess Elida, Oliver B, Turok, the thing that goes doink in the anime, Ruth, Gozer the Gozerian, Solitary Pictures, Ulrich Bogdan, Geek Filter, Melinda Walters, Toby Jackson, Jen, Auntie Kate 808, Becky Sparks, Bernabe Likes the Poodle, Robin Powell, T Love, Tracy Scrabbit, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Quite Bearish, Rosalind Bennett, Pau Barabajoggle, and Mira G. Thanks so much.